Hi everyone, I'm Molly Kingsley, founder of Usforthem, and this is the first in our new series, Exposed by Usforthem, in which we aim to delve into some of the subjects that we think should be being discussed in mainstream press and aren't being, and in particular, delve into some of the things that we've learned through 4 years and counting of legal and campaigning work. So, um, one of the things that we're hearing a lot about in the aftermath of the US election is Robert Kennedy's plans to clean up corruption in public health. Some of the things he's said about this, he said, the institutions of our government have been captured by the industries they are supposed to regulate. As a result, these institutions put corporate interests above public interests. Now, that was Bobby Kennedy speaking in the context of the US in the run up to the US election, obviously about the US regulatory framework. But it's the same here, where the entire regulatory framework for the pharma industry is riddled, and I mean riddled, with conflicts. Now, this is a really good example of an area which our media seem very keen to avoid altogether. We might ask why that is. We probably will ask why that is in later sessions. In particular, we might ask whether it has anything to do with the vast sums of money that at least some of our media organisations have taken from the pharmaceutical industry. For now, though, I want to just delve into a few of the issues that Bobby Kennedy talks about when he refers to regulatory capture in the pharma industry. So, for this, you're going to need to understand a little bit of background to how the pharmaceutical industry is regulated in the UK. And there are two limbs really to that system. One of those is self-regulation. The other is independent regulation by MHRA, the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency. That is an independent regulator established as an executive agency of the Department of Health and Social Care. First, though, let me talk about self-regulation. So, in the UK, oversight of the promotion of prescription medicines has been delegated to the pharmaceutical industry. So, really, the industry is allowed to, in effect, mark its own homework. The promotion of prescription medicines, that includes, by the way, therapeutics and vaccines, are subject to a code of practice written and administered by a body called the PMCPA, the Prescriptions Medicines Code of Practice Authority. The PMCPA is actually a division of the Pharmaceutical Industries Trade Association, the Association of the British Pharmaceutical Industry, or the APBI. I promise that is the last acronym. Now, the entirety of the APBI's leadership team is staffed by senior industry executives. That's not actually that surprising, given that it is an industry trade body whose primary reason for existing is to promote the interests of that industry. What is, though, more surprising and we would say concerning is that the PMCPA, so the part of the APBI, which is meant to be overseeing all of the pharmaceutical industry's promotional activities, that has been given only a dozen staff. So it's a tiny division of the APBI, and it has no power to conduct and instigate independent investigations into the pharmaceutical industry or its companies, and it's got no power to impose financial penalties on pharma companies when they are found guilty of breaches of the industry's code of practice, so the APBI code. And as a few of you are no doubt aware, there have been a lot of breaches, some of them serious, by pharmaceutical companies of its code of practice recently. They include breaches by, or probably by most of the major pharmaceutical groups, certainly by Pfizer, Moderna, and AstraZeneca. So, just to give you an example, Pfizer has been found guilty of serious breaches of the code at least 7 times since 2020 in relation to its COVID vaccine products alone. Last month, Moderna received 2 notices of the most serious breach of the code, bringing discredit upon the pharmaceutical industry in the space of a single week. Yeah, imagine that, being found guilty by your regulator twice in a single week of bringing discredit on your entire industry. And the really shocking thing about this is that in all of these cases, as in fact in all other cases adjudicated by the PMCPA, there is no financial penalty payable by the pharma company. In fact, there's no meaningful consequence at all. And I think really we have to ask here, if you have, a system where pharma companies are routinely breaching their code, repetitively, sometimes seriously, sometimes in relation to children, do we even have a regulatory regime at all if there's no meaningful penalty for those breaches? In April this year, Usforthem wrote to the president of the APPI, and we pointed out that there appeared to have been a pattern of serious and repetitive rule breaching by Pfizer of the industry's code of practice, and that seemed to have extended over a 4-year period, quite a long period. One of those instances included its CEO, Dr. Borla, misleading British parents about the safety of its COVID vaccine for children. That was a case that we were involved in. And our letter pointed out that for those serious transgressions, Pfizer appeared to have met no adverse consequence at all. And we made the point that in other similar cases where repetitive rule breaches had been shown, pharmaceutical companies had at least been audited by the APPI and in some cases suspended altogether. And we didn't receive a reply to that letter, and perhaps that's not all that surprising when you realise that the president of the APPI, the person we directed the letter to, was Susan Renow, who, as well as being president of the APPI, was at the time also managing director of, wait for it, Pfizer UK. So that is how self-regulation is working. I'm going to talk now a little bit about the flip side, independent regulation by the MHRA. Before I delve into that though, one of the things that is often pointed to here is the fact that MHRA is substantially funded by the industry. So that in itself isn't all that surprising. In fact, it's a standard model, relatively standard model for an industry regulator to be funded by the industry it regulates. However, what is concerning is the degree to which that regulatory authority, MHRA, appears to have been captured by industry interests. So let's just take a look at the composition of MHRA's board of directors. I'm going to flash that up now. And you can see 6 out of 14 of those individuals have disclosed, this is all public, have disclosed that they hold conflicting roles and interests in the private pharmaceutical sector they regulate. So just running through these now. So one of the MHRA's co-chairs has a paid role for Sanofi and has previously had his research paid for by Pfizer. The other co-chair holds shares in AstraZeneca and has a paid role for another pharma company. One of its non-execs holds shares in Merck and has paid roles for 2 other pharma companies. Another is the chief operating officer, important role obviously, of a health innovation company. Another non-exec is a current shareholder and paid director of a pharma software company. Another holds shares in 2 other pharma companies and has a paid executive directorship at the Gates Foundation. In the interest of balance, I should point out the thing that MHRA have on their website here, saying that decisions to approve medicines and medical devices are taken by the executive team of the MHRA rather than by the board. However, and this is me talking, not MHRA, however, the board is the body responsible for overseeing the exec team. Importantly, the board will also, one assumes, be responsible for setting the strategic direction of MHRA. And, what is that strategic direction? Well, as many will know, and as June Rain, the CEO of MHRA, famously articulated about a year ago, the strategic direction of MHRA has recently been recalibrated so that the exec team regard the MHRA to be an enabler of innovation. Protection of the public, it appears, is no longer the main priority for MHRA. MHRA also has a number of independent advisory bodies which help to steer its activities. And one of the most important of those committees is called the Review Panel. Its role is to review important decisions made by MHRA. In lay terms, it's the regulator's supervisor. And in what must be one of the most shocking conflicts of all, I literally couldn't believe this when I found it online, the chair of that review panel is also a director of CEPI. So CEPI stands for the Coalition of Epidemic Preparedness Innovations. It describes itself as a global partnership working to accelerate the development of vaccines. And the majority of its funding comes from a small group of governments and philanthropic organisations that are also heavily invested in vaccine development and manufacturing. So, the chair of the panel responsible for independently reviewing the most important decisions of the UK's medicines regulator, MHRA. Those decisions might include, for example, safety critical decisions to approve or not approve a vaccine, including vaccines given to children, is also the director of an organisation whose raison d'etre is to advocate for the acceleration of vaccine development and approval. You couldn't make it up. Anyway, it's for threatening to take on exactly these kinds of issues, this regulatory capture, very stark it is too sometimes. It's for threatening to take on that in the US that Robert Kennedy is now being labelled a dangerous crank. And as for them, needless to say, we absolutely reject that mischaracterization. We think the question our political and media classes should be asking is this: how much longer will the UK tolerate a sham regulatory system for an industry with so much power, not only to support health, but to harm it? Thank you.